who was born, I said this to Chomsky, my mom was born without civil rights in this country.
Right.
She's a young woman, but in 1960, we didn't have civil rights in this country. We didn't have them. My entire community didn't have civil rights. And you want to tell me, we've been voting for Democrats since then. And you want to tell me that I should tell those people, oh, but you should vote for Biden because of the environment.
Right.
Like, come on, I care about the environment as much as anybody, but you have to be realistic. I'm asking you about voter outreach, not about how in the abstract people should consider and weight the interest here. You got to give people something material, something they can put their hands around and that they can feel.
All right, guys. Welcome to the Tim Black Show. I'm your host, Tim Black. Today on the Power Hour, I have the former National Press Secretary for Bernie Sanders' 2020 campaign, the co-host of the Bad Faith Podcast, contributing editor at Current Affairs and former senior politics editor at The Intercept, none other than Briahna Joy Gray, the BJG.
Hi, Tim. It's so nice to be here.
Hey, I want to thank you for taking time out. Welcome to my humble abode. Make yourself comfortable. Do whatever.
You have a great set. It's a great set. I'm taking notes over here.
It's virtual, so it's nice. You don't want to see what's really behind me because that would be bad. I'm in a basement, you know. And look, I want to jump right into this, but to start things off, Briahna, what I'd like to do is I have some bad news for you, BJG.
Oh dear.
I have a time machine. The year is 2023. You've been drafted. Your job is a senior advisor to a political campaign of candidate X. Now, candidate X is amazing. This person has policies to the radical left, Green New Deal, Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage, and bare minimum, ending mass incarceration, legalizing marijuana, all the things we love and we want, end the wars, bring home the troops, all that good stuff, get rid of poverty. And you are the head honcho. You're the right hand to this person. So, with your advisor,
she's already messed up.
Already need a do-over already. But no, and look, and I'm gonna be your sergeant at arms. So anybody who doesn't listen to you that works for us, I'll get rid of them.
Okay.
So you get to craft you get to craft the strategy. You get to decide the trajectory of the campaign. And with your vast experience as being on the most popular campaign for the most popular politician with some fundraising records and popularity out the Kahoo, what would be the three things that you would do, but you would implement into that campaign to make it win in 2024?
Well, having such enormously popular policies are a good start. Obviously, a lot of people were inspired to volunteer for Bernie Sanders in unprecedented numbers, to give money to him in unprecedented numbers. A lot of people don't know that not only did he bust through every other kind of fundraising record, that Black Americans gave more than they had ever given in a political season, and Bernie Sanders got the biggest chunk of that as well. You know, so there were a lot of things that were done right. I think another piece that one could emphasize more, though, is connecting those policies to how they're going to affect people's lives in real time. Because I think that sometimes even if people liked what Bernie was offering, they didn't quite believe that it could get done. So one aspect of that is talking about it not just as Medicare for all, this is how it works, but really breaking it down philosophically, because people don't understand. It's hard for Americans, as hobbled as we've been by our healthcare system, to really appreciate the freedom of being able to walk into a hospital, get treated, and walk out without paying anything. And folks are still very confused about the difference between Medicare for all and Medicare for all who wanted all of that. So I would be very clear about what that Medicare for all program is about, and not flinch away from making really hard line distinctions between candidate X and the other candidates in the race. Another aspect of that is making sure that people believe that you can do it. And that was another big struggle, because folks have been lied to for so long, and they've been so disappointed by what politicians of all stripes have offered over their entire lives, right? People have lived in multiple generations of poverty and struggle, and they want to know why this time around it's not going to be a lie, especially since so much more is being promised than what is normally promised. And I think to get that across, you have to really emphasize the things that actually hold politicians back, right? So it's not just that Obama tried really hard, but he couldn't get it, or, you know, Republicans are just evil, so they can't get it. No, we have to talk about the connection between corporate financing and what politicians will and will not do, and really emphasize the extent to which other candidates are taking from big money, super PACs, corporate donors who are actively working against the policy interests of the American people. Was that three things? I don't even remember anymore.
It was actually. It was, because you said that, okay. First of all, people got to believe that what you're saying to get done, that you want to implement the policies, you have to apply them in a way, or display them, explain them in a way where it really is tangible to people's lives. And they say, okay, this is how it really affects me. It's not just theoretical, but this is how your life's going to change. Hardline policies that you can describe, that people could feel, see as visceral. They're like, oh, okay, so I'm gonna make more money. Okay, cool. Okay,
right,
that sounds good, but is the money coming in? And then you want us to like also, you would have to be able. You said, at the very end, you said they would have to be willing to challenge the other candidates, hit them hard, knock them off the square, take them down, body slam them, WWE, if you got to do that. Hey, man, sometimes you got to go. People got to go. You need to go, and we need to do that to you. And I love you, but you got to take that with you. And then thirdly, I think we said we also have to have, they have to have the belief that, okay, so this is what's broke. Let me explain in a more detailed fashion why it's broke, who broke it.
Yes.
People love that, don't they? That's part of Trump's appeal, I think.
Name the enemy, right?
Yeah,
right.
They love that about Trump. I'm sorry, you said it was about the enemy?
No, you got to name the enemy, and you got to diagnose the problem.
Yeah. I think with the Hollywoodification of America, just we got to have the good guy, bad guy. You got to point them out, know that that's the bad person, and then and also at the same time elevate yourself as the.
And even if they're not a bad person, I think sometimes the difference between leftists and mainstream Democrats is that, Democrats think in terms of just who's good and bad. And they believe that good politicians, if they seem like a family man who, looks nice in a suit and who's charming behind a podium, that to the extent that they fail, it's because they were doing their best in the system, they were up against some kind of obstruction from Republicans or what have you. And that people who don't do good they're bad. They're like evil. They don't want to do good. When in reality, you get all these, a Cory Booker type who seems like a perfectly delightful person, but we all know that he took more pharmaceutical money than, I don't know if that's still the case, but at a certain point than anybody else. And that had a direct impact on his voting down, being able to import drugs from Canada, and a bunch of other bills that would have really helped his constituents. So I think that there's a certain freedom in saying, hey, this isn't personal. It really isn't. It was frustrating at times, I know, to folks when Bernie was like, Biden is a good guy. But honestly, if that had been coupled with he's made terrible decisions that have been, bad for the people who he has been responsible for in this country, then whether or not he's a good guy becomes completely immaterial. And I would love us to get to a place in this country where honestly nobody cares if a politician is a good person or a bad person. The first thing that they look to assess whether or not they should support the person is where their money comes from.
Yeah, I guess what requires us to be politically mature, where we see politics in a different way than the way we see our heroes and heroines in history, or the way that we watch movies and TV, the way we consume media, where we had to have in our minds this good guy, bad guy scenario. And you're right, it's kind of immaterial when it comes to who's going to make your life better. And that is really like something that we need to get past as a people, as Americans in general. I mean, I think that applies to all. I mean, a lot of people voted for Bush because they thought he was the kind of guy who sit down and have a beer with you, not even taking into account that he was an elitist from a very rich background who wouldn't share a beer with you. What are you talking about? Get out of here, But they felt because he couldn't string together a coherent sentence, he's just like us.
And honestly, I mean, in retrospect, now that we live with Trump, the idea that Bush was incompetent feels a little heavy-handed. And the reality is Republicans know how to play a certain kind of game and seem likable and approachable. And to this day, I don't think everyday Democratic voters, but a lot of elite Dems in the Democratic establishment have an open contempt for that kind of approachability, kind of like a calculated ease. And I think that, George Bush didn't grow up chopping anybody's wood on any farm and wearing a cowboy hat or doing any of those kinds of things. But he was smart enough to understand that those were features that were appealing to most Americans, not ones that one would have a contempt of. And, I've been binging The West Wing because I went on the West Wing thing recently. And
congratulations.
Thanks, it was fun. It was a fun episode. But there's this whole scene leading up to the election of the President Bartlett in his second term, where he's going up against a George Bush character. The Republican is very Bushian. And they have this big moment at the final debate where he enables him to basically win, because he calls him out for his anti-elitism and goes in this whole screed about how there's nothing wrong. I shouldn't have to be ashamed of going to Princeton or whatever. And it's so out of touch, but it's written as the slam dunk moment. And it is really an important insight into the psyche of the liberal who has gone from being angry at Republicans for being anti-intellectual to overcorrecting and becoming snobs in actuality. And it's hello, there's a middle ground here where we can all respect each other and we're not overly beholden to credentialism and putting people unnecessarily on a pedestal and disrespecting the experiences, the input, and the knowledge of people from a working class background. And at the same time, you can believe in science.
Got it. Are you saying that maybe some of the lack of sophistication that George Bush and maybe some other politicians expressed, particularly on the Republican side, is more of a manufactured ploy because they're playing to their base and they kind of envision this is what the base wants. They want, nonconformists. They want more everyday type of guy type of thing. I see Trump kind of doing that as well. It's, they're playing the role.
I do, but I don't think that it needs to be, I think that most people don't need their presidents to be like them either. Exactly. But they do want them to not feel like they have contempt for them. So I don't think it requires a performance of putting on a cowboy hat or doing the Annie Oakley routine that Hillary Clinton did, where she goes upstate New York and talks about how she loves to shoot guns and does a shot of whiskey or whatever. I don't think that anyone needs a kind of performance, but they want to know that if you walk into a room with them and they have a cowboy hat on and they like to shoot guns and they like to drink whiskey, that you're not going to look down your nose at them.
Got you. It makes sense. Yeah, like me. But actually, I don't think I think there's an old joke that I would never. There's no group that I would belong to that would allow me in that I would want to belong to. Right. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you let me in, but I don't think that I want my presidents to be smarter than me. I mean, that's the whole point. I would like to think they make better decisions because the whole world is looking at them and they're kind of responsible for a lot of people. So I totally get that.
Yeah.
So 2024, you're that campaign director. You're the person that's making those decisions. What do you put around you? What do you need behind you? What would that campaign look like structurally, and who would be your press secretary, or what would the characteristics be?
Well, I don't want to pretend to have more political experience or knowledge than I do, and I played a really discreet, narrow role on this campaign. So I don't want to second guess anybody else's.
Yeah, but this is you in the future. This is not okay. Fine.
But I'll answer the question though. I just want to put that caveat on it.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that given the progressive nature of this candidacy, that there's gonna be a great deal of pushback from the media. We have to anticipate that the media is going to use right-wing framings to address every issue. We spent the last 2 years with our so-called liberal pundits on MSNBC, many of whom, frankly, are from the Bush White House, a fact that never ceases to amaze me, talking about, asking how much Medicare for all will cost, and, talking about pay-fors in a way that is completely out of step, obviously now, with the lived reality that we're in during COVID time. And there hasn't been a single apology, right? Hasn't been a single apology. And I think that a lot of people sincerely don't understand that there is a meaningful difference between Medicare for all and Medicare for all who want it. But who were so eager to have a reason to collapse the differences between Bernie Sanders and the other candidates that they wanted to believe because they needed to justify why they supported Pete Buttigieg or Kamala Harris. Well, not so many people were trying to justify why they supported Kamala Harris because there weren't that many supporters out there. But, some of these other candidates that were real players in the contest. So I think messaging needs to come out strong and early and ubiquitously that explains exactly what these things are, and that we should really leverage the influence of all of the young people and creatives that disproportionately liked Bernie Sanders early. So that if you have a guest on a show, the View was openly antagonistic to Bernie, right? Like to a point where if it were me, I would never have had him go on again after the first time. It was beyond disagreement. It was like personal hatred. It was bizarre. Right. There was one instance where they had just had Andrew Yang on, and then they had Bernie on, and they asked him, hey, have you ever heard of this idea of like the 1% versus 99%? Andrew Yang was talking about that. I think it's a really good idea. And Bernie was like, yes, I have actually heard of it. I mean, the level of, and I don't mean this as an insult, I just mean this as a descriptive measure, ignorance that the host displayed really spoke to their, I think, fundamental contempt for the candidate. But I think they would have a very difficult time doing that if, say, Ariana Grande was a guest on The View and she was advocating for Bernie, or Dua Lipa, or all of these, Cardi B, these other people that they like, and who frankly are brown, Black, female, and much more difficult to stereotype in that way. So I don't know that if candidate X is a white man or some other demographic combination that would make it easier for them themselves to kind of bust through the Bernie bro narrative. But if not, I think there's a lot that can be done with surrogates to both push through the negative narrative, but also do a lot of the explaining work about why this stuff matters, particularly using people who have personally dealt with healthcare issues in their own lives. Like Cardi B is so valuable because for most of her life, she was a working class person who can speak from personal experience in a way that's a lot more compelling than, just getting, I love Tom Hanks, but just getting Tom Hanks or somebody who's a more affluent celebrity on your side.
I see your point totally. I often and enough with the fast forward with the time machine thing. I appreciate your directness, your candid, being so candid. I often wondered why, why don't we have more strong surrogates that are willing to go out there and just take it to them? I'm more aggressive, and I just think that that's necessary when you're dealing with these establishment creatures who have to parse every word, and they're being really meticulous and drawn out. I think we just need to go on and just say, hey, we need to put the money in the people's pocket, and that's what needs to happen, and we need to make sure people can get sick. And we need to stop shaking the Robitussin up and putting water in the, in the thing, and actually have, medications and people doubling. So I just think in the delivery, one thing that was missing or could be missing in the campaign is just being able to just bold and let that surrogate be willing to go down with the ship. Let that them, I know I'd be willing to go down with the ship for you, Brie. I mean,
well, I would recruit you in an instant, Tim. Like the reality is, I'm not sure, and I have it wasn't as though I had an explicit conversation about this with anybody senior enough to make the decision. And I, to this day, am not really sure why surrogates weren't deployed more and why I personally did very little TV in the grand scheme of things. But it seemed obvious to me that if you had a candidate like Bernie Sanders, who personally was kind of uncomfortable breaking from a certain kind of script, and I don't say that as a critique. I think that there was a lot of value in him sticking to a script and saying basically the same thing for 40 years. It's a large part of why so many people trusted him and why he was so effective. It takes saying the same thing for 40 years for a message to get across in the way that it did. So kudos to him. But if that is the strategy on the part of the principal, on the behalf of the principal, then it requires some more dexterity on the people around him who can say things and do things that don't necessarily come back to him, but that can advance the message in a way that might work for this community, might work for that community, that you don't want to tag with the candidate, but which altogether advances the goals, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we had so many people on our side. In terms of our cultural capital, we were unmatched. There's a world where you could have explainer graphics passed out to Ariana Grande with her 1 million followers, Cardi B with her 1 million followers, all of these people with millions and millions of followers, and have a constant inundation of education, and have people tuning in. These wonderful video what do you call them, live streams that they've been doing since COVID, I think could have been done throughout the campaign. You know, my little corner of the world on the campaign that I had control over was the podcast, and we worked overtime to make sure the podcast had a visual component and to try to do the educational work and the kind of concerted messaging work that I had hoped the broader campaign would do. And ultimately, there was, you know, that didn't happen to the extent that I would have liked. But in our little corner of the world, on our Hear the Burn, you know, I decided this is what the news cycle is this week. This is what the negative smear is this week. And this is how we're going to combat it on the podcast, right? You know, the Joe Rogan thing happens. We make sure that we have, you know, trans women on like 2 consecutive podcasts talking about why it is that they support Bernie, talking honestly about how they felt about that incident, and talking about what pros and cons, what compromises we should and shouldn't make in coalition building that was really authentic and not meant as a cover, but meant to help folks understand why somebody would focus on being able to have their gender affirmation surgery paid for over whether or not you like something that a podcast host has said in the past, you know, and these are the difficult questions that I think are really well suited to longer formats that you just don't get on the cable news. Right. And Bernie had enough popularity, enough of a digital imprint to not have to ever deal with cable news. You know, we could have been breaking policy on our live streams and forced everybody to tune in to understand what he was even doing. He could have been given direct responses to negative smears on the live stream, so we could completely control the narrative. We could have had the Cardi sit down. We could have live streamed. We could have Twitch streamed. We could have done all of those kinds of things, and you know, we did a lot of that. We did more than the other candidates, but given the enormous amount of prejudice that existed toward Bernie on the mainstream media, I think that we needed to do even more, a lot more to compensate for that.
Man, you're so innovative and creative with these ideas of how to really take advantage of where we are right now. You know what I mean? No one's doing that. Like Joe Biden's not, you know, live streaming and long form live streaming and having surrogates long form live stream about issues and flesh out policies and doing it in an unconventional way. He's like, I don't know, I think he's still in the basement or chilling out. Or but, you know, COVID-19 puts us in a precarious situation. Yeah. But I'm just saying, I mean, they're not doing what you're suggesting. I think you're undervaluing your ability here, campaign manager.
Well, the other thing, though, is, and people raise this point ad nauseum on the internet, which is that Joe Biden ultimately won, right? Oh. So we have to be also humble and introspective about why it was. I mean, yes, I think that media was an enormous part of it, and I don't credit anybody's critique of Bernie that doesn't acknowledge exactly what an enormous role unearned media played. I mean, we got no support after we won Nevada, right?
Right.
In fact, we had Chris Matthews talking about how we were literal Nazis. I mean, think about that.
Brown shirts,
Chris Matthews sat on the cable news after Bernie won the most diverse state that had voted to date and winning 70% of the Latino vote, and called his supporters brown shirts, fascists, Nazis. And it was just another day. It was just another day on TV. Meanwhile, how many millions of dollars of unearned media did Biden get after winning South Carolina, right? Most Americans, when I raise the idea, when I point out that Bernie Sanders was consistently number 2 with Black voters during the entire campaign, and that only he and Biden got out of single digits with Black voters, and that in February, Bernie was actually number 1 with Black voters. People say it straight to my face, you're just lying. They refuse to accept it because there's such a gulf between that reality and what was being articulated on the media. I went on Al Sharpton once and said that to him. He was like, "Where?" I said, "In America." Everywhere. He's number 1 at the time, number 1 with Black voters. But, you know, if you think everyone else doesn't like him, then you're going to trust the herd at a certain point. And that's not a criticism. That's like human nature. And I think media figures understand that. The established media understands that and really works the idea of herd mentality. And this is what everyone else is going to do. And Biden is inevitable. And spun that into a narrative in the same way that they spun Hillary's inevitability into a narrative in 2016.
You know, if Biden is inevitable, that would, I guess I wouldn't be hearing all of these folks, these corporate media folks telling us how we need to get out and support him. I mean, he's already inevitable. He's the guy, right?
They want their cake and they want to eat it too. Mm-hmm. So either it's important for Biden to be able to put together a coalition that includes progressives to win. And therefore, Biden needs to accommodate the interests of progressives, or at very least, not spend his time punching at us and putting us down and demeaning us, right?
Yeah.
Or he doesn't need us, and that's fine, and he can win without us. And you should stop putting all of this pressure on progressives to say or do what you'd like, because you should be so confident that your candidate is the winning ticket that you can win without us. Now, I'm not saying that, I have an enormous amount of respect for how reasonable and how strategic so many leftist voters are, right? There is a reason why an overwhelming majority of Bernie voters in 2016, twice as many Bernie voters in 2016 voted for Hillary Clinton than Hillary Clinton voters in 2008.
Why isn't that the narrative, Brie? Why isn't that the narrative that people are, sending around? Why isn't that the narrative that people are promoting? If that's the reality, and it is the reality, and it's something I've said many times, but for some reason, it's just like not permeating the skulls of corporate media that Bernie's people did, in fact, go vote for Hillary in much higher numbers than the reverse when it was Hillary Clinton against Barack Obama.
Because they need to vilify the left, because the left is a much more dangerous threat to the status quo than Trump is, than the Republicans are, to be honest. I mean, look at the realignment that's happening with the Lincoln Project and all these moderate Republicans. We have George Bush's comms woman in the primetime spot on MSNBC. There is a realignment happening, and it's not horseshoe theory, right? It's not that the far left and the far right are going to get together and be Nazis together. It's that the corporate wings of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have become great friends and bedfellows in the shadow of Donald Trump. And whatever realignment we see, if we don't want it to be a corporate Republican Party and a far-right fascist party, then it's going to require a lot of Democrats to look internally and be really thoughtful about whether or not they want to put their support behind a new left party, a People's Party, the Green Party, whatever third-party alternative exists. Because if you look at the numbers of younger voters in particular, and frankly, the younger voters aren't that young, right? I'm a millennial. I'm 35 years old. Do you know what I mean? So we're talking about adults in the room, right? And the majority of people in my age bracket, a little bit older than me, and then to much younger than me, but basically people under 40, they think that socialism is more likely to improve their lives than capitalism. They support, all Democrats support Medicare for all, 88%, and the majority of Republicans do too, but it's particularly heightened among younger groups. There's a real lack of flexibility when it comes to the Green New Deal and the assuredness about what we absolutely have to do now. That is really inspiring. And they are not going to continue to settle for these middling candidates. And that is something that I think we should be very clear about now. Fine, I understand that the battle this time around has been lost. And I completely respect the desire to get Trump out of the White House and to nominate and to elect Joe Biden. But people are really fooling themselves if they think that they're not going to be in this exact same position 4 years from now with Tom Cotton or somebody who is much more capable than Donald Trump to implement fascism if you don't radically change your behavior. And protesting, I'm just putting this out there, protesting is not going to do it no matter how big the protest, no matter how much the protests capture the media attention. Because what we just saw was the biggest protest in American history over the course of this summer. And it had absolutely no effect on Joe Biden's criminal justice platform. Or they were also asking, Black Lives Matter platform includes Medicare for all, canceling student debt, free college, a lot of other things that Joe Biden has aggressively said that he is not interested in doing. He said during this pandemic that he would veto Medicare for all bill if it passed the House and the Senate. Even if it passed the House and the Senate, he would veto it. Why? Not because he's a bad person or a good person, but because his senior advisor is a former healthcare industry toady, and he's going to fill his cabinet and his panel of advisors with people exactly like that. And so we have to be really clear-eyed about that and be willing, I think, and ready to leverage our votes in an organized way well before we get to this point in 2023.
Yes. Which was my only critique of the Ice Cube with the contract with Black America. And when I had Dr. Derek Hamilton on the show and we had that conversation, I'm like, hey, man, what were you doing in the primaries? I need you guys during the primaries. Well, we had a guy, his name was Bernie Sanders, and yada, yada, yada.
Well, Derek Hamilton he was the Bernie Sanders surrogate.
Yes, he was. But Ice Cube. Yeah, right.
Cube. Yeah.
I'm not you, Brie. I couldn't get Ice Cube, but I got Derek Hamilton, which is great. Derek's a great guy, but
he's amazing. Well, here's the thing. Ice Cube said that, and I know it was frustrating, and I was trying to explain to him that despite, I know the viewer reaction is going to be like, come on, man, like we had a chance. But I also think there's something to be said. No, I always want to hear a voter. I always want to just internalize what the voter is saying before I jump into a defensive or shaming place. And I think that for a lot of people, perhaps on Ice Cube, he's affluent and has time on his hands and maybe should have looked during the primary. But a lot of folks are just dealing with life. And whereas all of us live and breathe this stuff and have been consumed with this election since, 2018, that's not the average person.
Right.
And so part of the strategy has to be, like, if it requires getting people to pay attention during a primary, what percentage of people vote in a primary? Like 30% of the country? Like nobody. Almost nobody. Yeah. I didn't get to vote for Bernie Sanders, right? Because it was over before we got to New York, right? Or basically over. So I feel like if we understand that that's the case, we have to figure out how to grab people's attention when it matters. And, we can sit here and be frustrated at Ice Cube, but at the end of the day, there was a fabulous piece in the New York Times earlier this week about non-voters who don't plan to vote this time around. And it talked about how single mothers are like the biggest group of non-voters. It doesn't take rocket science to figure out that no one who is stressed out and working probably close to subsistence wages is going to hire a babysitter so they can stand in a line for 4 hours and vote. Like you're not going to do it. So if that's the case during the general election, can you just imagine the mind power that is required for these people, the people who should be the base of our coalition, working class people, to be able to be attentive to it far in advance. And so we need to figure out what to do to get that buy-in when it matters. We need to figure out how to do a long-term campaign strategy that doesn't result in people being exhausted, but which makes people feel like they're being recruited to a movement that can really change the material circumstances of their lives.
Which goes back to how we started this show, when we talked about the three things that people need to do, or the campaign will need to do, in order to ensure a win in 2023 or 2024, I should say. One of those being tangible results that excite people, that applies directly to their lives, that makes people's ears perk up when you say it. Okay, that's what Green New Deal is. I know there are people who don't understand what Green New Deal is. And
that's not an accident either. There's been a lot of confusion. Joe Biden says, I've got my own Green New Deal. It's the same thing that Pete Buttigieg did with Medicare for all who want it. And that's a real danger I want to really emphasize here. That I understand why people want us just to simmer down and not say anything until after the election. And it might not seem like it, but I'm holding my tongue on 75% of what I want to say, to be honest, because I respect that. And I don't want to alienate people who might otherwise be allies who feel a real visceral fear of Trump for legitimate reasons. And I want to respect that and not be an impediment to getting him out of office. At the same time, if Joe Biden is attacking our movement and attacking our ability to, advance our vision of the world, if he's appropriating the idea of healthcare as a human right when he has absolutely no intention to provide healthcare as a human right, he's been saying that a lot, healthcare as a human right. That directly undermines our ability to message and advance our cause. When he talks about my own Green New Deal, that's not just him winning and despite the left, that's him winning at the expense of the left. And I feel like if he's going to come for us, as they say proverbially, it's our responsibility to defend the turf that we have worked so hard to carve out for ourselves. We didn't get to 88% of Democrats supporting Medicare for all by accident. We did that by consistent messaging and Bernie Sanders beating that drum for the last 40 years, and then for the last 4 years in particular, in a way that has transformed our community's perspective of what is possible for them politically. And I don't think that we should be required to give up that progress in the course of this election, when Joe Biden could very easily win by doing what he's doing. He can keep cornering John Kasich and the moderates and win that way. He doesn't have to punch left, but he's working on a bigger project, right? There's a bigger project going on here where people's fear of Trump is being exploited to further marginalize the left. It's not enough for Biden to win. he beat the socialists and he wants to keep beating down this movement so it doesn't become an impediment to him advancing a neoliberal agenda over the course of the next 4 to 8 years. And I think that we shouldn't be lulled into a sense of responsibility to help him hurt our movement.
So, that being said, voting blue anywho. If we say if we say that, okay, we get it, we don't want Trump, I think I can, for me personally, I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm not voting for Trump. I do have my mail-in ballot sitting upstairs. I filled it out last night. I'm really considering maybe turning it up and going to the polls directly in person.
Well, I think you have to now. Aren't they saying that anything mailed at this point isn't going to get in there, so you have to either drop it off at a location or vote in person?
Well, I could drop it off at the locations right up the street, but I'm in Maryland, by the way, and it just started with the 26th. Early voting. So I could go, theoretically, I could go up there right after this show. So, Bree, you might sway me. But I know the conversation's been had, after your interview with Noam Chomsky. Guys, if you haven't checked out the video, Bad Faith Podcast, Briahna, Virgil, they have a conversation with Noam Chomsky. It's riveting. And at the end of it, it's the discussion is about how far is too far to go to support a Democrat or vote blue anywho to mitigate pain with Trump. Where do we draw the line? Do we ever draw the line? And there's been a lot of criticism of Joy because Joy stands on that. Joy, have you changed your opinion at all? Is that what you're saying here, that you want to be more conscious of this, feeling that we got to get Trump out by any means, or are you still where you were?
No one has offered even the most marginally persuasive argument to rebut me. So I don't know why I would change my opinion. Look, the only argument that people make, what they just scream back at me is, but Trump is worse.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That was established at the outset at the conversation. Trump is worse. I established these parameters to the conversation. Trump is worse, and assume everyone on this panel is voting for Biden, right? So we're not talking about 2020. Just stop talking about 2020. Let's talk about strategically what we need to do to make sure we're not in this exact same place in 2024. That's the question. I understand, even if I could have an argument with you about whether or not Trump will substantively do more or less bad than Joe Biden in terms of foreign policy, that it's been pointing out that Democrats have been the ones that have been able to effectuate enormous cuts to the social safety net that have ruined the lives of Black people and brown people in this country. I could point out to you that Democrats have been the ones that have the cover of the Democratic big capital D that has enabled them to execute the criminal justice reform that Joe Biden spearheaded and Ronald Reagan can never do the way that Joe Biden could do, under a Democratic administration. I can make that argument with you, but I'm not interested in it. Let's just concede that point because that's uninteresting, and we're not organized in a way that we have to be to pose a credible threat to Joe Biden at this time in a way that gives him the space to respond to our needs and win, right? The goal here isn't for Joe Biden to lose. The goal here, when I brought this up 6 months ago, and no one paid attention to it till now, but when I wrote my article about litmus tests over the summer, the point was to say we could leverage the enormous frustration that is spilling out into the streets over the murder of George Floyd. We could leverage all of that to extract concessions from Joe Biden. Those concessions would make him a stronger candidate, make him more able to beat Trump because he would have more enthusiasm behind him, and it would make him a better person, a better candidate because he would make our lives better because he would now believe in all of these things that most Americans believe in, right? That was the argument. The argument isn't let's hold our votes hostage so Joe Biden loses. It's not let's hold our votes hostage and make Joe Biden adopt some esoteric policy that only a fringe part of Americans are even interested in, that hobble his electoral chances. That wasn't the fundamental argument. The fundamental premise is that there are policies that would actually make Biden more electable, and he's refusing to do them.
It would actually help him win.
It would help him win.
Right.
So I'm like, that ship has sailed, obviously, because no one was interested in having that conversation when we could have done it. But we have more than enough time to set up that dynamic for 2023. So what does that look like? It could, and this is what Chomsky wouldn't engage with. I was making the point that vote blue no matter who is exactly what has enabled the Democratic Party to ignore captured political groups like Black Americans. So when we talk about political capture, what we're talking about is when you have a group that is always going to be faithful to a party no longer has any interest, has no incentive to meet their demands. Because this vote blue no matter who stuff, this, oh, Donald Trump is so bad stuff, that's what Black people have been doing since time immemorial. The Republicans have always been a threat to our existence. The Republicans have always been evil. We've always believed that Republican candidates have been racist. These Democrats are acting like Trump is brand new, but I think this is a space that Black people have occupied for a very long time. And when you look at the results of that, of Black people faithfully in over 90% numbers voting for the Democratic Party, what you get is a lot of lip service, a lot of people who become very good at talking about the hot sauce in their bag and intersectionality and these broad concepts and saying, we really need structural reform, and then saying, oh no, but not Medicare for all though. We want to talk about the Black maternal health disparity, but we're not going to look at the Black women scientists and researchers who tell you that the biggest predictor of the Black maternal health gap is that Black women are disproportionately on Medicaid and discriminated against in our healthcare system, which has a two-tier healthcare system, right? And so maybe if everybody was on government insurance, we wouldn't have that kind of, we would have lower rates of that kind of discrimination, right? Or Black women are not being able to go to certain doctors and certain hospitals because they're disproportionately on Medicaid. Or the fact that Black women, one physician, it might have been Dr. Dooley, was explaining that when she sees women coming in, pregnant women, oftentimes they have to refill out the forms and their address is changing multiple times during their pregnancy because they're home insecure. And what the toil and stress of that does to a pregnancy. So you want to talk about big structural changes, but Bernie Sanders was the only one offering a housing guarantee. Bernie Sanders was the only one offering a healthcare guarantee, right? But people care more. People like a certain class of Black elite punditry cares more about your ability to say intersectionality than your meaningful commitment to programs that actually understand the intersectionality of racism and what it's actually going to take to end structural discrimination. So I got way off topic. We're supposed to be talking about Noam Chomsky, but I wanted to talk about the strategic. I wanted an acknowledgement that voting blue, no matter who, results in an apathy from the establishment toward your group because they no longer have to court your votes. And if you're a moderate Republican, if you're a swing voter, you get a lot of time and attention. You get to be John Kasich put into the Joe Biden administration. They're not putting AOC in the Joe Biden administration. They barely let her have 2 minutes to talk at the DNC. Okay? And that's not an accident. We can't be mad at that when we offer our commitment, our loyalty up freely. I don't think that we should vote for Republicans, right? I don't think the Republican Party has anything to offer us. But Ice Cube opening himself up to either party reveals the extent to which Democrats aren't even willing to pretend to respect his plan. And even if it's cynical and ill-intended, Republicans are at least willing to sit down and listen to him and Republicans are willing to pretend to take him seriously. And this is an important point. And this goes back to the earlier conversation we were having about respect and George Bush and the cowboy hat and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. There was a town hall that Chris Hayes did in, I think, 2017 in the wake of the election. And he went to coal country and he asked these folks, do you actually think that Donald Trump is going to bring these manufacturing jobs back? Raise your hand if you do. Nobody in this crowd raised their hand. And so we said, why did you vote for him? And one of the coal miners said, well, because at least he respected me enough to pretend. At least he respected me enough to say that this is what I deserved. And Democrats won't even do that.
Wow. I'm looking at your tweet here. Liberals need to stop doing this. Vote blue no matter who was an admission that even if Biden behaviors were identical to Trump's, you'd vote for him to protect Roe and EPA and HCA. Stop being shocked that Republicans also put their bad principles over civility. I agree with that tweet wholeheartedly. I think that that's part of the problem. But I also believe that in the Black community, specifically the community I'm most familiar with, that this is not the main issue that's stopping people from going to the polls. I mean, I think people's apathy towards politics in general creates this gap or a lack of interest in voting, not only for Joe Biden, but basically voting for anyone. I mean, I come from a background of people that I'm one of the few people and that I knew that actually voted, like was actually concerned with politics. In my household, people didn't vote because of the sarcasm, sarcastically how we felt about politicians in general and about their reluctance or lack of actual policies that impacted us. So while we're having this conversation, I've seen a lot of liberals coming at you. Some call themselves progressives, others less progressive than others. Attacking you for saying, well, maybe we should be sure that we can get something for this vote, which is a very basic thing. I think that what they're missing the point is that, Biden's already know he's going to get you. Okay, so he's already got you and, these people whose names you probably don't want me to mention, but he's already got you. He's not going to get people like me. He's not going to get my homies. He's not going to get the guys I grew up with. They're not paying attention to him. And that may be the difference between winning this election and not winning this election, and to your greater point, winning the next election, and on and on and on. And this is not just, we're just not in a vacuum. We're just not only looking at this moment in time, but we're looking at the projections of elections to come. So I agree with you. So if Joe Biden wins this election, and people, I think that the Negro whisperers who might take it as a win, that they were able to convince black folks and other disenfranchised people to vote. He becomes more what? Does he become more entrenched? Does this further this notion that you don't got to give those black people nothing? See, worked again.
Right. And right now what we're seeing is, as lots of reporting has been done about the number of black men who are defecting from the Democratic Party, right? And there's been a lot of interracial, a bunch of these elite journalists, female journalists have been, kind of really, turning the screw and talking about, what's wrong with black men? Black men are the problem. But if you looked at the Black Women's Roundtable report that came out a week or two ago, Black women, especially Black women under 30, are defecting at a very high rate as well. And there has been a steady and increasing indication that Black women don't have any confidence in the Democratic Party. I don't know if you remember, there was that clip of the 3 Black women on MSNBC or CNN or something last week that the liberal white women lost their minds over. They're like, what's wrong with these women? How dare they not? You know what? I don't know if you remember that scene in The Color Purple. It's my favorite movie, where Miss Millie is trying to drive home after dropping Miss Sophia off at Christmas time, and the black men are trying to help her back her car out the driveway, and she gets afraid and starts talking about, I've always been kind to you people. I've always been kind to you people. That's what they sound like. They don't understand when black people start acting with any kind of autonomy or asking anything in return. They think that they can give the bare minimum. They think that after 15 years in prison, she can drop Miss Sophia off to see her children for the very first time, that these black people should be grateful to her.
Right.
Instead of understanding that they deserve a lot more than they're being given. And I'm tired of getting Miss Millied by the Democratic Party. To your other point.
That was very quotable. That was very quotable, by the way. Miss Millie. That's dope.
the other point, to earlier point about how important the black vote is. It's not enough to say the black vote is so important. If the black vote is so important, if you literally lost in 2016, arguably because of the black vote. Now, people don't want to say that because they think it's blaming black voters, and a lot of people get very sensitive if you talk about how there are many different populations that could have helped put Hillary over the edge. But you can't ignore the fact that in a state like Wisconsin, 88,000 black people who voted in 2012 didn't vote in 2016. Okay, and her margin of loss was 22,000 votes in the state. 88,000 black voters who voted in 2012 in Wisconsin did not vote in 2016. And a study of the 2 most populous districts in the state showed that voting suppression was the smallest reason why. When asked, only about 4% of people indicated that their votes were suppressed. More like 60% of voters gave one of 2 answers that were basically getting to the idea of the Democratic Party never does anything for me, or my vote doesn't matter, right? So why is there all of this courting of white women at Panera instead of these 88,000 black voters who have demonstrated that they have voted for you in the past, that they are loyal Democrats, but all they want is some return on their investment to come out to the polls again in 2016. In Michigan, we just did an interview with Michael Moore yesterday for our Thursday after tomorrow's episode of Bad Faith podcast. He was pointing out that there were 80 odd, close to 90,000 people in Michigan who went to the polls, stood in line on a cold, frigid day. Those Michigan winners aren't no joke.
Right.
Stood in line and filled out every part of the ballot, Democrat, 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 all the way down, but left the top blank because they didn't want to vote for Hillary Clinton.
Whoa.
In Michigan, where we lost by what? A sliver. Or Hillary lost by a sliver.
Yeah,
okay.
Good point. Hillary lost.
yeah. So how can you say that you care about the Black vote if you are going to be so indifferent to our interests in the middle of this criminal justice revolution that's happening in the street? Be so tone deaf and beating this law and order drum. And issuing, did you see this joint statement that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden just issued about the death of Walter
Wallace Jr.
Walter Wallace Jr.
Mm-hmm.
Where they spent like this much of the address talking about how, yes, you shouldn't kill people. It's sad that the guy is dead. And then like this much, like another like enormous paragraph talking about, but looting is bad and law and order and all of this nonsense. I mean, it's like they're actively trying to demoralize us. And somehow it's our fault by pointing that out. You know, if they wanted to win, if they cared about our votes, they know what they want to do because they are more than capable. They've demonstrated themselves to be more than capable of being solicitous and kowtowing to Republicans. They have been themselves more than willing to bring Republicans into the fold, and they know exactly how to do it and how to make them feel loved. And they are not just ignoring us, but they're working overtime to make sure that all of the groups that have formed literally the backbone of the Democratic Party don't get that love. And I feel like we're, you know, at a certain point that the onus has to shift. The onus is not always on the voter to keep fascism at bay. At a certain point, I think the media narrative has to be the media narrative has to place responsibility rather on the people in power who have control of the outcomes, and that is the Democratic Party establishment.
I agree. I question if they actually want to win. I question if I think what it is, Briahna, is that they're willing to sacrifice Black voters for white voters, and that's basically where they come up at it. And I also believe that we're not just talking about the liberal elite. We're not just talking about those in corporate media who dine at the table of the corporations. We're talking about some progressives or some who call themselves progressive in the same bucket, because they, at the end of the day, if you're saying it doesn't matter that my people feel disenfranchised, it doesn't matter if we're the ones at the bottom of the barrel, that we need to be scraped off the bottom in a country that we built for free. If you say it doesn't matter of our plight of homelessness or poverty, child poverty, income inequality, you brought up the maternal death rate or paternal, the mothers, the Black mothers, and the death rate and giving childbirth, and if that doesn't matter, if none of that's important, mass incarceration, none of it's important, none of it's more important than voting blue, and when there aren't direct policies that mitigate those issues, I don't care if you said that you're progressive. I don't care that you read all of Noam Chomsky. You don't care about my people. And if you think that's a fringe attitude, the only reason why I even started my YouTube channel and started doing this is because I wanted Black people to get something for their vote. That's not a radical left idea. That's a very mainstream idea in the Black community, that Black people need to get something out of this politics, or why pay attention? Why be involved?
I was very disappointed when I saw so many progressive pundits that I considered to be friends giving commentary on the Chomsky conversation and being so willing, like frankly Professor Chomsky was, to skip over and dismiss the core of my question, which was Black people have been voting no matter who for all of this time, and it's resulted in our interests being ignored. And moreover, what do you say to the Black voter who suffers equally, whose life experience doesn't materially change from Republican to Democrat? Mm-hmm. What do you say to them about why they should come out and vote this time, and for all of that to be ignored? Me appealing specifically to real people who have been living in multiple generations of poverty, and for him to not even have an emotional response or any kind of acknowledgement just on a human level. I'm talking about my family. I'm talking about my mother, who was born to a 17-year-old mom, you know, who grew up in the projects in Cleveland in the 1960s. You know what I mean? Like, who was born, I said this to Chomsky, my mom was born without civil rights in this country.
Right.
She's a young woman, but in 1960, we didn't have civil rights in this country. We didn't have them. My entire community, didn't have civil rights. And you want to tell me, we've been voting for Democrats since then. And you want to tell me that I should tell those people, oh, but you should vote for Biden because of the environment.
Right.
Like, come on, I care about the environment as much as anybody, but you have to be realistic. I'm asking you about voter outreach, not about how in the abstract people should consider and weight the interest here. You got to give people something material, something they can put their hands around and that they can feel. You know, AOC said this in an interview in Vogue today, or Vanity Fair today, that was very good. And she's like, she was, you know, pointing to, I think, people around her, like someone driving by in a cab and like people walking the street. She said, if his life doesn't feel better, if he doesn't feel different in 4 years, we have a problem. You know, if Joe Biden doesn't make that man's life better in 4 years, we're going to have a problem as a party. And that's the way people should be thinking about politics. And the willingness of so many white progressives, to be honest. And I've spent so much of my career defending white progressives. So, like, I was particularly hurt by this. Their willingness to say, Briahna just doesn't get it. She doesn't understand the court. Some person, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I went to law school. I went to a pretty good law school. You know? I practiced as an attorney for 7 years. You know, I did a federal clerkship. I understand the courts. You know, and they're willing to be so dismissive of Black concerns. The second it was Black people deserve more, there was all this. And how can you say that there's all this talk about having to build a coalition, a multiracial coalition, a working class coalition? What color do you think working class people are in this country disproportionately? And you said earlier, you know, like, I don't know, man. You do know.
You absolutely do know. You are grounded in it. You understand it totally. You're articulating it in a way that hasn't been articulated. And I'm going to tell you something. I haven't weighed into the conversation with Noam Chomsky because I hadn't watched it until today. Because I've been very busy, because I've detached myself because of the same aspect, the same frustrations that you feel. I've been feeling for a long time. So I disengaged and said, you know what? I'm just going to focus on building my community. I am not a part of this progressive movement anymore. Yeah. I'm Tim Black. I'm one entity. I'm solo because I saw it all the time. There were times I was critical of Bernie Sanders. When the reparations conversation came up, I thought he should take a different tack. He need to be more deliberate. Don't tell me you don't really know what this is about. And I love Bernie. I'm a diehard Bernie Sanders supporter. Killer Mike's been on the show. Nina Turner, you've been on the show. Michael Moore's been on the show. But I felt that this is something I need to put my foot in the ground and say, you need to do a better job on this, Bernie. I love you, guy, but you got to get this shit together. These progressives supported Bernie, not talking about it. They start talking about strategy as if they were Democratic consultants for the Democratic Party. They start playing defense. Oh boy, he doesn't need to say that. He doesn't need to acknowledge Black suffering in America. He doesn't need to acknowledge that we built this country. They need to acknowledge that we had no civil rights until the mid-60s. We need to acknowledge that the systemic racism that's played out and how it's impacted our lives. That's just a gotcha question. These are progressives, not liberals.
It was so irritating. Look, let me tell you the truth about this. When I had an inkling that I was going to join the Bernie campaign, they had reached out and I was making my decision, in the process of making my decision. I decided to write my last 2 articles for The Intercept about reparations because I was afraid. You know, I wanted my personal feelings to be on the record because I was afraid that I might be in a position on the campaign where I couldn't talk freely about my support of reparations. And when I do feel like the reparations conversation was cynically wielded against Bernie in a way that wasn't fair.
I agree.
I think that nobody cared about reparations. I mean, Black people cared, but you know, the political class didn't care at all. They all opened their candidacies in 2019 with a conversation about reparations out of nowhere because they felt like that was Bernie's most vulnerable issue in 2016 where he slipped up and Castro took a swing and Warren took a swing and they all took a swing on the reparations thing because they hoped it would marginalize Bernie. And then once it became clear that that wasn't an issue, nobody brought it up again for the rest of 2020, which showed you exactly how much they cared, right? They didn't care. But that doesn't excuse, I agree. I think that there is a willingness to acknowledge the need for retribution and payback for other historical harms, where when Black people bring up reparation, even good liberals roll their eyes. And there is a contempt. There is a lack of respect for the harms that have happened to Black people and a get over it already attitude that makes progressives unwilling to fight for this. And so Look,
but Bree, I hate to cut you off, Bree, but as you stated earlier, it's not just that it's theoretical or that it's a moral issue, but it's also a winning issue.
Yeah.
It's a winning issue for Black Americans to vote out what you say. You want Black people to come out. You badger Ice Cube. You badger anybody Black who even hesitates to pull the trigger. The Black women who say they're not sold on Kamala, they're not sold on Joe Biden. You go after them. You come for them. Jamel Hill wrote a piece where a couple tweets that went viral. She was so disgusted that Black men don't, she was talking about, misogyny. She was talking about the patriarchy, but still was aimed at Black men. Like, Black men, we're not getting it. But this is the group you need, and this is an issue that's on the top of their shelf, and you don't even want to address it. You don't even want to. You could do two things at one time. You could say, yes, we feel like this is aimed at Bernie Sanders, but also we need to address it, and Bernie needs to support it. Those two things could exist.
And here's the thing, Medicare for All wasn't popular. Right. It wasn't popular like it is today in 2016. And I'm not saying, like, I appreciate that there is a lot of work to be done, and I'm not saying that, Bernie or anyone else should necessarily, use all of their political capital on an issue like reparations when the country is in such a shambles. I understand kind of weighing priorities. There are a lot of things that are big priorities to me, but I understand that, like, when I talk about canceling student debt, I'm always very careful to talk about canceling medical debt too, because even though I don't have medical debt, I know that I can reach a broader audience and make sure that I don't seem so self-interested. Plus, canceling medical debt costs like no money, and it's ridiculous that we haven't done it. It's $81 billion. Like, we could do it if they wanted to. So I'm not saying that, like, there aren't certain strategic implications, but even if it's not going to be the center point of your campaign, the way Medicare for All is, I think that you have to be willing to fight for it and popularize it and have conversations about it that help people to understand why it is that everyone should support reparations. So if there's any benefit to something like the 1619 Project, it's supposed to be letting Americans become more aware of the historical facts that make reparations a necessity.
Right.
And someone like Bernie Sanders, who is, one, Jewish, right, and has that kind of direct legacy of the Holocaust in his family, and has been supportive of reparations for survivors of the Holocaust. And two, and I think has genuine empathy for the Black American plight because of his own personal struggle, right? There was a reason that he started a core chapter in college in Chicago and was protesting housing segregation and getting arrested as a 19-year-old. Like, he felt that simpatico, and I respect and appreciate that a great deal. But also, Bernie Sanders is Mr. Economics. He's Mr. Class Divide. He's Mr. 1% versus the 99%, and it's so easy to flip that narrative into a racial narrative because it is racialized. Matt Brunig does this. I am always talking about this, and I need to have him on the show to talk about this again. But there's all this conversation about how Black people have 10% of the wealth of white people. It's true, and it's disgusting, and we need to close that gap. It is also true that white people, the white middle class has 3% of all white wealth, and the Black middle class has 3% of all Black wealth. So they've got us down here fighting over scraps, the 3% versus the 3%, when all of the money, 97% of it, is being held by the top. So there is no greater avenue to wealth distribution, including to Black people, than a wealth tax and the redistributional programs that Bernie Sanders championed. And my argument was that he should frame things more in that way, and that we should talk about reparations as a tort. So as a legal harm, right? So the same way that survivors of the Holocaust and their descendants are able to sue, the train companies that were carting families to Auschwitz and all of these kinds of things, these institutions that profited off of chattel slavery are still in existence and are continuing to function because of the enormous amount of wealth of labor that was stolen. And smart people have calculated how much wealth was stolen and what we're owed, and they can follow not every dime of it, but there are a great deal of existing institutions that could be called upon to pay reparations, including the government, which participated in redlining in our lifetimes.
Right.
In my mother's lifetime, in the lifetimes of living Black Americans who aren't even old. So this idea that reparations is pie in the sky, or you're going to come up against all these arguments of white people saying, oh, but it wasn't me and it wasn't my family. That's fine. You're not being asked to pay. But just like in any legal case where a tort, where a harm has been done, I think that people could think creatively about setting up, commissions to help Black people basically sue these institutions for the money that they owe us. Crimes were committed and money is owed. And there's a lot of ways that you could frame it differently so that you would get less pushback from white people who feel like, it's not my fault personally. Well, let's give people a target that is legitimately easily, perceived as causing the direct harm to our community.
And at the end of the day, Briahna, I don't think that they would actually go down that rabbit hole that far anyway. Once Bernie had parlayed that particular issue and presented some meat on the bone, so to speak, I think they would have backed off knowing that, okay, they don't want to go there. They don't really want to have that conversation, and they would have moved on. But the fact that they saw a vulnerability in his response and the reaction that the punditry class were able to elicit from that and what they were able to reverberate across spreading that narrative, that's what made them sort of stay there longer than they did. And as you stated, they ended up moving on anyway because they weren't really concerned with it. Yeah. Sort of like people were saying that Trump is regarding the Trump campaign is with Ice Cube, with the other issues that he brought forth with the contract with Black America. They said well, Trump's not really sincere, and neither was Elizabeth Warren and Michael Bloomberg about justice and Black issues either. I saw that Dr. Dooley sent out a tweet. I got to talk about this real quick because. She says, I don't know who needs to hear this, but Bree Joy is fierce and fabulous. Anyone who says otherwise is jealous that they're twice as old with not even half her talent. If you disagree, get the fuck out of my feed. Okay. I saw this and I did a Tony Baker. I said, what in the haberdasheries and hemoglobin is going on here? What the hell is going on? Bree, why? This from Dr. Dooley, such a sweet person. She dropped the F-bomb and she's what's going on?
Look,
please tell.
We're in that part of the campaign cycle where folks are scared. They really want Trump out of the White House, and they are looking for enemies to beat up on online that make them feel better about Biden's chances. And I respect, I know why people are afraid, and there's some good reasons to be, and I respect that, but I am not the punching bag that you're looking for. And so an extremely mediocre person decided to get in a Twitter fight with me for some reason, a reporter from the Hollywood Reporter. Oh. And normally I don't go that hard if you're just an anonymous account, but it was a blue check person who just came for me out of nowhere. I don't know who this person is at all, and was making a lot of ad hominem attacks, and was very unnecessary. And he kept coming for me, and I kept responding in a way that resulted in a ratio for him, and I don't know why he kept it up. But here's the thing. I never when I pick a target, when I occasionally, come for someone on the internet, I do it with the full knowledge of what the consequences might be. And I make sure that I've dotted my I's and crossed my T's, and I know I'm right. If I do a tweet at a Joy-Ann Reid or someone with a lot of followers, I have to be ready. And I used to do this back when I had 300 followers, I have to be ready for the consequences. I better be damn sure I'm right and have the facts and the receipts to back up whatever claim I'm arguing. But I never used to get ratioed like that when I would pick fights with people a lot more powerful than me, because I would be prepared. But these people, they feel the need to attack me and then act victimized when I respond. So that's what happened. It was him, and there was a woman who was a smaller account, but who has spent a lot of time saying that Senator Turner and I are diamond and silk, and saying a lot of racist, inappropriate things. Wow. And so I felt like she had asked for it also. Maybe not. So I had a wild day on Twitter. A lot of people were trying to attack me, and that was Dr. Dooley showing some solidarity, which I really appreciated. She's such a sweetheart, and I will love all of the Bernie gang until my dying days.
Yeah, I think they underestimate that we actually have people that support us and followers and folks that are ride or die for us because they believe and believe that we're on the right side of history and we're fighting a good fight on their behalf. And they're just not ready for it. I ran into the same thing with your good friend, Dr. Jason Johnson, who came for me in a similar fashion, and he thought I was an easy win, Johnson, and he then found out, oh, I got all these people and I kicked his ass. And he was like, I can't believe this guy really. So just parlaying into that, did he ever apologize to you about that whole thing? Did he ever come to you and say, you know what, hey, my bad?
Not at all.
Not at all. Okay, I saw him back on TV, but he seems to be a considerably less vomit-inducing and less abrasive. I don't reply to him because, frankly, I don't want to see a brother out of job. It's hard for brothers to get jobs nowadays. Some of the things he said, I'm like, man, don't you want to take that back? Don't you want to walk it back? Why are you doing this? You don't own the root. You don't own anything. You go on other people's platforms, corporate media. Dude, you could be fired. And then he was put on the bench for a while. So I don't expect you to respond to that. I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, look, one of my responsibilities, as a press secretary was to talk to the media about what Bernie's coverage was like. And long before he said what he said on the Karen Hunter show, he was the editor at The Root, which is, for better or for worse, one of our most mainstream Black-centered news outlets. And, there were a lot of moments where there was a lack of journalistic integrity. So I too I'm not looking to get people fired, but also I think that Black people deserve more in terms of editorial integrity than what was being offered under his leadership there. Basic factual errors, him a writer had cited him as a source in a story about Bernie coming back after a heart attack. So they were, he had opined that Bernie would miss the next debate because of the heart attack. And I wrote asking for a correction because, every doctor said it was only a 4-day recovery and he would be at the next debate. And he refused to make the correction and didn't see any problem with the writer having cited him, who was not a medical doctor, to opine on that. And I was like, I would never, I was trying to imagine a world where I was an editor. I was a senior politics editor at The Intercept, where I would have a writer cite me on a story as an authority on what was going to happen to a politician as a medical authority. And so we had some back and forth over those kinds of things. And, I think that those were actually a lot more significant than him popping off at the mouth of the Karen Hunter show. I think that the bigger issue is when people let their personal biases affect reporting. And we don't have enough outlets. Black people don't have enough people giving them serious content to have. So I don't, he has a mainstream job as a professor, and he will always have that probably. And I'm glad that he has that because it's hard out there and we need Medicare for all. And I don't want anybody to lose that safety net.
Well, I'm glad to see that you're doing well because I saw people making threats that you would never work again and you would be, ostracized and you were going to be a pariah after taking these principled stances for Bernie Sanders. That your life is over now. They were doing memes and being really harassing. I'm like, you know what? I'm glad to see that you bounced back in a way that, and you're going nowhere but up, sister. So I applaud you for where you're going now, what you've done, and what you intend to do, and what you're doing. Where you're going, where I envision you to go.
Well, I appreciate that, Tim. Look, it's not all wrong, right? The claim was that I would never work in this town again. And I think that's probably right. I'm not going to be offered, an MSNBC deal or Peacock channel or whatever, like people who are coming off of other kinds of campaigns, the podcast deal, there's no podcast deal or anything for us. Our podcast is doing very well, and I'm very grateful for that. But we are completely independent. We did it on Patreon because, I think that there was some real credibility to those threats. But as you have discovered as an independent media personality yourself, we now live in a world where technology has enabled people with independent voices to not have to rely on establishment channels to get their voices out there. And I'm so grateful for that. And I really encourage people to support your show and support independent media, left media across the board, because I don't know how we're going to get anywhere without it. Otherwise, people like me and you would be silenced.
But I find it 2 points. One is I'm not so encouraged the fact that establishments like The Root are considered to be Black media when it's not owned and operated by Black people at all. So, and the lack of people understanding that it's that who actually controls the messaging, who actually writes the checks, who decides the editorial at the end of the day, who has the final say over the content on that site. It's disappointing that more people don't realize that. Same thing with BET and many of these other outlets that they appear to have Black people at the helm when they don't. But then again, if your ideology is all about corporate America and you just happen to be Black, I don't see that as a benefit as well. But it's telling that folks would think you not getting a job working for the establishment is somehow negative.
Right. Like I knew what I was saying and doing when I joined up with the Bernie campaign, and I thought it was that important. I thought it was that important. And after the number one thing I learned, the feeling I had coming out of that experience was, when I thought about what I wanted to devote my life to after the campaign, one of the things that I couldn't get off my mind was we need an independent Black news media. We need to develop our independent Black news, because what would happen is you would get some, facts that you wanted to disseminate to Latinos, and there were a lot of, high voltage channels to get it out there, because of the bifurcation of like Spanish language news and English language news. There's entire news channels and institutions that you can use to reach Latinos as a whole, right? They're turning on their T and looking at Univision. There's no like Black news channel that you get when you buy your cable subscription. I mean, BET has dabbled in news stuff. Different channels have dabbled, but it's largely entertainment news.
True. Very
There's
true.
no like straight news channel that does substantive reporting that's geared toward Black folks that we can rely on. And to your point, is owned and operated by Black people as well. So it was a challenge to communicate directly with a large proportion. You would have to I can put an article in Essence, and I can do a radio buy here at these stations, and here's a local newspaper. But it's difficult, and I think that it hurts our community, and it hurts our ability to kind of, as a group, get a stream of information that is authentic and not having to rely on, well, John Conyers said, Jim Clyburn said X, Y, and Z. So I guess we're going to go with that. Like, I don't blame Black people for relying on figureheads in that way, because there's not, we are not served as we should be in terms of the media resources that are available to us. And it's younger people have the internet, and so they were for Bernie, but older Black people in particular are stuck in a media silo where they're over reliant on mainstream media channels and all of the propaganda that goes on there. So that, to me, if that is going to be something that I continue to try to fight for and push for, because I think our community deserves better than we're getting right now.
I totally agree with you on that, and I don't. What I'm hesitant to do is be disparaging about Black people, and that when it comes to that, as you pointed out as well, because this is a universal. This is a problem that's affecting all different segments. I can't tell you the amount of older white folks who watch Fox News. That's their only news source of news, or Rush Limbaugh. They listen to Rush Limbaugh, and that's it, and so, transversely, you got Black folks who listen to, I don't know, Roland Martin. I don't know. I don't know what they're doing, but I take it as a responsibility that we need to do more outreach. And I think that's going to be the difference in that 2024 election that we hypothetically presented. I think our ability to get media and be our own media to do the messaging.
And that's why I wanted to have Ice Cube on. Like, I don't agree with everything that Ice Cube says and does, obviously, but I can sit here and yell at him on the internet and get some retweets, or I can invite him into having a conversation with prominent, persuasive leftists like Derek Hamilton and Philip Agnew, and expose him to ideas that I hope he perhaps might be interested in adopting someday, because I think that we have the same goals, even if we're having different approaches. And that's why people are like mad at me for saying, oh, let Kanye go on bad faith. But like, Kanye, I know he's all over the place, and I hope that he deals with whatever issues are going on in his life sincerely. But also I see sparks of simpatico. I see him talking about how Bernie would have won in that Joe Rogan exchange. I see him talking about how capitalism fails us and how we work together as communities and how socialism is good. And I'm like, oh, well, if he feels disaffected from the Democratic Party, I would like for him to feel more comfortable moving left and joining up with us than putting on a Trump hat and negotiating with Donald Trump, right? Like, we have an opportunity to influence people and persuade people. And I think that that's a lot healthier than just castigating people and shunning them and trying to shame them into having a different kind of political belief, because we know that shaming doesn't work.
It doesn't. It doesn't. Bree, tell people to go to get your podcast.
You can listen to it wherever you get your podcast. We put out one free episode a week on Thursdays, but we also have great premium content, which we are not trying to do it this way, but some of our best episodes have ended up premium episodes. So you can find it. I always get the link wrong, so let me read it. It's patreon.com. Sorry.
Take your time.
It's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. Patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. We've interviewed Marianne Williamson in a way that was a really great interview. I think she's really empathic and gave a really good case for voting for Joe Biden. The Noam Chomsky interview, obviously. And Virgil and I do a lot of one-on-one interviews as well that people have really responded to that don't have guests or panelists, but where we work out some of these more difficult issues on the left in like a safe environment where we can decide what we feel about things.
Okay, guys. Follow Bree. Subscribe to her channel. Subscribe to Bad Faith Podcast. Do that today. Briahna Joy Gray, thank you so much for taking time out. This was a great conversation. I got your back. I support you. We love you.
Thank you. I support you too, Tim. I really do appreciate you and all the other fighters out here in our small but growing army.
Yeah, and we got our work cut out for us, especially if we're going to win in 2024.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. That's it, guys. I'll see you on the next one for the Tim Black Show. Peace. Well, that'll do it here for the Tim Black Power Hour. Thank you for joining us. And don't forget, find the Bad Faith Podcast on Patreon. Go to patreon.com, Bad Faith Podcast. Also, subscribe to the Tim Black Podcast by going to patreon.com, Tim's Take Live. All right, Johnson. Wolfpack.